Yes! Yes!
Bro, are you alright?
High altitude mountaineering is one of the highest stakes games that any climber can play. There is so much that can go wrong, so much that you have to prepare for. One wrong move or one stroke of bad luck can spell the end of your trip, or worse. It's all a roll of the dice. So you might be wondering, what exactly is high altitude mountaineering, and what are some of the risks that are involved with it? So, high altitude mountaineering has to do with climbs on mountains that go higher than 8,000 meters above sea level. There are 14 of those mountains in the world. Special equipment is required to climb these mountains, including oxygen, because the air pressure up there is so much thinner. Proper training is also required to overcome the severe weather and terrain, because humans are not adapted to such. Careful planning also helps minimize risk as well as being aware of any dangers that might be up there. Any climber, new or experienced, will face significant and mental challenges up on the slopes just because of how tough it is to climb these mountains. The documentary that my presentation is based off of is called 14 Peaks, Nothing is Impossible. You can find it on Netflix. The main protagonist, his name is Nims Purja, and he is a Nepalese climber. His goal for the documentary was to climb all 14 8,000 meter peaks that I mentioned before, all within the span of 7 months, and during which he documents his entire journey, struggles and successes alike.
But Nolan, what are some dangers I might experience up on the mountain face?
You know what, Jackson? That is an amazing question. Let me tell you. However dangerous this all may seem, there are several things that you can do in order to keep yourself safe up on the mountain face. There are several dangers that may lay on the mountain face, ranging from avalanches to storms to severe cold. However, an inadequate climber may face something that pales in comparison: high altitude sickness. There are several things that you should know and several things that you can do to ensure your safety. Knowing the dangers of high altitude climbs and how to train and prepare for them is one of the most surefire ways to help increase your odds of survival and fun. Humans have not evolved to deal with the effects that higher altitudes bring, including the low air pressure and the extreme cold. But the lack of oxygen due to the low air pressure is the main cause of high altitude sickness. High altitude sickness might present itself faster in people with pulmonary and heart problems, because those are the systems that get the oxygen around the body. And also, depends on how fast you go up the mountain, that's what's going to have the symptoms onset faster. So you might be wondering, what are some of the different high altitude sickness types that you might experience up on the mountain? Well, there are a few. So we will begin with AMS, which stands for acute mountain sickness. Is the least severe out of the three that you guys see here. It usually starts to onset, the symptoms do, from 2,000 to 2,500 meters above sea level. Usually starts with headaches and migraine-like symptoms, and less oxygen in the blood in the form of hypoxia. Now, aside from AMS, there are more severe forms of high altitude sickness. There's HACE, which stands for high altitude cerebral edema. This is the more severe type and usually starts to show when you're around 4,000 meters above sea level. It starts with cyanosis, which is when, mostly in your fingers and toes, you'll start to notice them turn blue. You'll notice impaired coordination, and in extreme cases, loss of consciousness or death. This is because your brain is not getting enough oxygen for your body to function normally. And now there's a second type, which is really similar, which is called HAPE, which stands for high altitude pulmonary edema. It's pretty similar, except it affects the lungs more than the brain. If you notice any other climber start to show these symptoms, you're going to want to get them down the mountain as quickly but safely as possible. Now, unfortunately, in his documentary, Nims noted how he suffered from haze after trying to help a fellow climber who was dying on the mountain. He says how he could barely walk, think, see, or hear, and that it was the closest to death that he has ever come. Minding these symptoms and warning signs can mean the difference between life and death.
Nolan, after hearing about the dangers of high altitude sickness, I don't think I want to climb anymore. It just sounds too dangerous.
I see what you're saying, Jackson. Now, while that may sound all of that terrifying to any climber, new or experienced, there are certainly ways that it can be mitigated. One of the best ways to ensure that your experience on the mountain will be smooth is to properly train ahead of time, because a lack of training will affect your ability to climb. Training will also ensure that you have more endurance so that you can keep doing more every single day on the mountain, and it will help offset the onset of altitude sickness. There are several key factors in order to properly train for an expedition like this. Making sure that you start training at the right time is key. Year-round training is always a good idea, but if you start to ramp it up around 4 to 5 months before your climb, it ensures a good period of training without losing interest. Outdoor activity is also something that you should keep in mind. I mean, you're going to be out there anyway, so get used to it. There are many activities that you can do outdoors, such as hiking, mountain biking, and believe it or not, climbing. And as cliche as it sounds, hitting the gym is also a great idea. They have the proper equipment, so you will be able to go hard on cardio and do lots of muscle stretches. Don't overdo it though. Keep pushing yourself to the edge of your limit. One of the most important things on this list is sticking to a schedule, as nothing else will matter if you can't keep it consistent. Consistency will help you build your stamina and cardiopulmonary endurance. Additionally, you should also set some goals for yourself. They shouldn't be impossible, but they should be somewhat difficult for you to reach, because that's how you're going to improve. And finally, while it may not be as big of a talking point as the others, making sure you eat enough healthy calories to fuel your intense workouts is a prime way of ensuring that you can reach your goals. Here's a tip. Before your climb, start to scale back on your caffeine intake. That way, once you are on the mountain, you can take full advantage of a caffeine boost. Kick the caffeine!
I moved away.
Now, all of these talking points that I just talked about, they're all well and good, but they won't do you any good if you just follow them as is. So make sure to tailor it for you and what you are able to do. High altitude mountaineering is one of the most dangerous activities that you can partake in, and can be very deadly if you do not know what you're doing. Yet there are many ways you can prepare yourself and be aware to ensure your survival and maximize your fun. Be aware of the different types of high altitude sicknesses and their onset symptoms so that you can recognize them when it happens to you or some other people. Proper training will also mitigate the aforementioned effects and help make you physically and psychologically capable of climbing such a tall peak while minimizing the risk of injury. So, if you're thinking about doing such a climb, use this info and go make that summit.
Ha ha!